the Bodhisattva of compassion, when he meditated deeply, saw the emptiness of all five skandhas, and sundered the bonds that caused him suffering. Here then, form is no other than emptiness, emptiness no other than form, form is only emptiness, emptiness only form. Feeling, thought and choice, consciousness itself, are the same as this. All things are by nature void. They are not born or destroyed, nor are they stained or pure, nor do they wax or wane. So, in emptiness, no form, no feeling, thought or choice, nor is there consciousness, no eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, no colour, sound, smell, taste, touch, or what the mind takes hold of, nor even act of sensing, no ignorance or end of it, nor all that comes of ignorance, no withering, no death, no end of them, nor is there pain or cause of pain, or ceasing pain or noble path to lead from pain, not even wisdom to attain. Attainment too is emptiness. So know that the Bodhisattva, holding to nothing whatever, but dwelling in perennial wisdom, is freed of delusive hindrance, rid of the fear bred by it, and reaches clearest nirvana. All Buddhas of past and present, Buddhas of future time, using this perennial wisdom, come to full and perfect vision. Hear then the great Dharani, the radiant peerless mantra, the perennial Paramitar, whose words allay all pain. Hear and believe its truth. Gate, gate, paragate, parasangate, bodhiswaha. Gate, gate, paragate, parasangate, bodhiswaha. Gate, gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhiswaha. So you can come out of meditation when you're ready. So in the second, after the tea break today, we'll be going in, we'll have a chance to look more closely at that text. But I thought we'd read it out because in this Buddhist tradition, that's how we mostly hear the Heart Sutra. So this is the text. The Heart Sutra is the name of just exactly that collection of verses, and there's a background to it, which so in some ways we can start to make some logical sense of it. So hopefully we will do that. But what you probably would have heard from that is there is a lot of things that they're saying. There's no this, there's no that, no feeling, thought or choice, nor is there consciousness. So there's a lot of saying no to things that we might not have even been thinking about anyway. So what do I want to say about that? Not too much. In in that this text is a very, very deep teaching. It takes quite a lot of unpacking even to like try and work out what it might mean intellectually. And traditionally we hear this text when we're performing a ritual. So in this particular tradition, we have a ritual where the Heart Sutra comes after a series of verses, which I think that starts to make sense of. It helps to put it in a context. Okay, so the series of verses, they help us to become more receptive to this teaching. So this is a teaching that we've been given. It's meant to be confusing, and what we need to do is to become more receptive in order to be able to make any headway with it at all. Yeah. So the first half of the evening, I want to explore this quality of spiritual, or let's just say receptivity, particularly in this context, in the Buddhist center, what that might mean. So I'm going to ask you what you think about that in a minute. But just to elaborate, maybe there's a story, is a Zen story that describes a lack of receptivity. So there was a monk who was a very great teacher, and many people used to go to see him and want his teachings. And a particular person came along, and the monk found him. Well, he came along and was, at the beginning of the conversation at least, they were having tea together. This person was asking for teaching, but the monk found himself unable to teach this person. The monk started pouring, said, "Would you like some tea?" And poured this fellow a cup of tea, and the teapot, it just kept pouring. It was getting closer and closer to the rim, right up to the rim. Then it started pouring over the sides of the cup, and the monk just carried on pouring, looking this fellow in the eye, and the tea went all over this guy's clothes. And even scalded his lap, and he just like jumped up and said, "Well, like, what are you doing? Why are you pouring tea all over me?" And the monk said, "Well, you're like this cup. You're completely overflowing with your own. We're completely overflowing. Come back when you're an empty cup. Yeah. So come back when you're an empty cup." And he sent him on his way. So I love that in the Zen tradition that people can be so there's no nonsense. We're much nicer than that in the London Buddhist Centre. Hopefully we won't pour tea on you. So that's an image for, it's often used as like an image for an ideal student in the Buddhist tradition as an empty cup. So what do you think? Well, maybe I'll just ask you all together. What do you think makes someone unreceptive? What is that cup overflowing with? What might it be? Or what are you like when you're not very receptive? Any thoughts? Yeah.
We're stuck in our own heads.
Stuck in your own head? So what's that like?
It's like very unaware of the people around us.
Okay, yeah.
For me anyway, so we're kind of just in our own heads and kind of not appreciating that there are a lot of people that we're sharing like reality with.
Yeah, sort of closed offness, isn't there, in being in your own head? Yeah, great. Good.
When I feel hard done by.
Okay. So we'll say a bit more about that, how that plays out in being not receptive.
Because I think when you feel like you've been unfairly treated, you'll want to put that back out into the world as a sort of... So if I'm not receptive because I'm pushing out that kind of negativity.
Is it like a quality of defensiveness or something? Yeah, okay, good. That's really good, yeah. So closed off, stuck in your own head, a quality of defensiveness from being hard done by. What else? Yeah.
Maybe when you're full of your own beliefs.
Yeah.
And you can't take on any other belief.
Yeah. I think that's really good. Yeah, and I don't know if you've ever been in a conversation where one or other of you is just so full of your own opinions that it's not going to go anywhere, even on that level. No one's going to make any headway. Yeah. So I don't know what's going on when you're so full of your own beliefs. Do you think? Yeah.
You're not opening a door for new ideas to flow in that might actually transform you.
Yeah. Okay. And why do you think you wouldn't open the door?
Because of fear of the unknown. Because of fear of not knowing what lies ahead.
Yeah.
Which is probably good for you.
Yeah.
But you don't know that because you're so used to, let's say, the bad or the comfort.
Yeah.
So you're not really open to change or receptivity.
Yeah.
Which is probably good for you.
Yeah. Okay, that's really good. Yeah. So there's a quality of fear of the unknown, which might mean that being full of your own beliefs might feel like a quality of, like, it might be comforting, mightn't it, to feel like, oh yeah, I know what's going on, I know what the world is like. It's like this. I've worked it out. Let's just stick with that and not. Yeah. Is that a hand raised, Helena? Yeah.
Yeah, I think safety is a good one. I think of my younger self. Also, maybe a quality of arrogance or judgmentalness is kind of, or linked to that an over-attachment to the rational. Kind of like, I already know things, you can't teach me anything. And the rational thing is like, well, if you can't prove it, then it doesn't count. And I think that's really dangerous because it can close off intuition, connection to the deeper.
Yeah. That's a few different points. Yeah, like particularly the arrogance of youth. I think we'll probably recognise our younger selves in that, and then also, attachment to the rational. So like just closing down to one section of our like mental experience and just saying this is really it. Yeah. Was that an agreement over there? I thought I heard a voice of agreement. Yeah, and so interestingly, in the Zen story, the other person, so there was the monk and then the other person was a scholar. So sometimes scholars in the Buddhist tradition don't get a great name because they're characterized of being like this. Full of their own opinions, ready to assert and argue their own opinions, and also attached to a certain level of thinking that doesn't allow them to go deeper in that thinking. Yeah. Which isn't to say that actually Buddhist scholars aren't, they sometimes get characterized, but actually Buddhist scholarship is also like wonderful, helpful, and can really deepen our practice. So we don't wipe away, we don't get rid of any notion of trying to learn anything at all. We'll get to that in the second half of it. So that's, we've just talked about what are the qualities of unreceptivity, and I thought maybe we could just let's get into groups of 3 and see if this is probably a bit more challenging, but see what are the qualities, or what are you like, or what does it take to be more receptive? What kind of state of mind, or what helps you to get into a more receptive state of mind? Okay, so that's a little discussion challenge. So get into groups of 3 and we'll just see how far we get with that. So, what came out of that little short discussion? What do you think is like being more receptive, or what kind of things help that?
Curiosity.
Curiosity, yeah, great. Yeah, that's lovely. Yeah. Yeah, it's got that exploratory quality, doesn't it? Curiosity. Yeah. Good. Anything else? Vulnerability. Say more about that.
I was giving an example. I don't know if this is vulnerability, but someone was saying to me the other day about the fact that when you're commuting, you can just not have your headphones in, and you can not be reading, and you can just look at people and welcome interaction.
Yeah.
And I think if you're maybe commuting or something and you're not feeling your best, that might be like a vulnerable thing to leave yourself yourself open to.
Mm.
But yeah, I think it's sometimes along those lines.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a lovely observation. Yeah, both of, like the practice of it, but also, yeah, this quality of vulnerability. Something like, I'm not gonna just automatically put up barriers against the world, and just gonna take a risk and see what happens. Yeah, good. Anything else? You were talking about something. Yeah.
We've spoken about humility. Being
Yeah.
humble enough to listen and to receive the words.
Yeah, great. And do you have a sense of times when you've experienced that yourself, in particular?
Not often, to be honest.
That was a humble thing to say. Yeah, good start.
Work in progress.
Yeah, good. Any final thoughts? How you would go if someone said go away and come back when you're an empty cup? What would you do? Yeah, Brian.
I just do what we always do here. Just meditate. You feel all the emotions in the body. You're aware of the thoughts. Drop in, feel everything, and then all of a sudden there's just spaciousness. There's not even a cup. There's just stuff happening. But I think that's what it's ultimately pointing to. But at the beginning, it's just like when we do the communication exercises. You try to be aware of everything in your body, taking in the other person, welcoming that and seeing what your response to that is, and then you're receptive.
Yeah, great. So you're developing awareness in all of those cases, aren't you? So meditation, you're sitting down and giving time to just that's it, the cultivation of awareness. Yeah, good, thank you. So as I said, we usually listen to the Heart Sutra in a ritual, and I'll just tell you what the traditional verses that lead up to the Heart Sutra are, and then we'll do some meditation, and then we'll have a tea break. We haven't actually really touched on any. I think all of those were really good answers, and the tradition gives us something else as well. So the verses, the first verse is called worship, and what that is indicating in that verse is a quality of faith that there is something of value that one can look towards. So in order to be receptive, I think you have to think, that there is something that I don't know about, that I can see that there's value in it, and you act on that sense of valuing something. Yeah. The next verse is called salutation. So it's a bit like in that you're greeting that the set of values. And in the verse, people paying homage and bowing. So you're preparing your mind by greeting, and as if that set of values was a guest, or you're a guest in their house. I think something like that. Then there's going for refuge, which is a Buddhist phrase. Going for refuge, that's the centre of all Buddhist traditions, is using the Buddha's teaching and the spiritual community as an orientation, something to move towards, and in doing that you're moving away from things that are more destructive or yet less helpful or not reliable. So there's this movement going for refuge, and we could spend weeks on each of these, so I'm sorry to be zipping through. But maybe I just want to mainly get an idea that there's a sort of trajectory of getting the mind ready. There's going for refuge, and then, so in going for refuge, you say, yes, the Buddha, yes, his teachings, I'm really behind that. And then surprisingly, the next verse is confession. I think it's by articulating to yourself value and that which you want to move towards, you suddenly realise, there are quite a few shortcomings. Suddenly you realise where you could have done better in the past, and maybe confession is a bit like making yourself vulnerable. You're actually admitting, okay, that did not go well. I was not at my best, and I will just state that, yeah. And the verse on confession is really about, it's not about guilt. It's really important to remember that in Buddhism. It's about making one's conscience clear and bright. There's a lovely word, pramoja, which is the brightness of a clear conscience, which is got this lightening quality. Confession, and having confessed one's faults, one rejoices in the good. Yeah, so that's the next verse. By oneself and all. So knowing that there's not only shortcomings in the world, but there is goodness, and many people have done good. So one notices it and brings it to the centre of one's attention. And then finally, just before you hear the Heart Sutra, there's entreaty. And entreaty is saying, I want to listen to the teaching. It's saying, please, can I have a teaching? Now I'm ready. So it's something like how all of these verses, like how can I prepare my mind to hear something deeper and truer? And if we take away even if we, the most simple thing that we can take away from that is that we do need to prepare our minds to understand things, that we can't just take things off a shelf. Sometimes when I was studying for exams when I was younger, I just thought, I just wish I could eat this book. I can't really be bothered to read it all. We can get quite consumerist about our knowledge and even wisdom. We want spiritual teachings that we can just scoff, yeah? But we actually have to prepare our minds, and then so we might have a deeper understanding of our minds, yeah? So that's really that it's not that you need to remember all of those stages, it's just there's this principle of how do we become more like an empty pot? How can we brighten our awareness so that when we hear something of value, it can pour into the cup, yeah, and we can retain it. Yeah, so welcome if you're just joining this class. If you've been in doing the course, final week of the course, very lovely to have you here in the main shrine room. I should say the big shrine room because everywhere's main in terms of shrine rooms here. So yeah, in the large shrine room. So this evening we're looking at a particular text. We're having a series on perfection of wisdom teachings, which is a particular period in Buddhism, a particular kind of flourishing, a particularly extravagant, actually, flourishing of expression, Buddhist expression. What came out of these texts, they were in India, what came out of this period were all these writings, which they probably gathered orally first, and then they got compiled. The texts have become so important that actually they started being sort of held sacred, and even became a figure. So prajna paramita. So that means there's this word prajna in Buddhism. That means wisdom, and paramita means perfection or perfection, something like that. So prajna paramita texts, and there's also a figure, a female Buddhist figure called prajna paramita. So the texts became so important they sort of evolved into this wisdom Buddha figure, prajna paramita. So what we did in the first half is we listened to the sutra that we're looking at tonight. So sutra is like a collection of verses, and a sutra describes it describes sets of texts that either attributed to the Buddha or they could be the Buddha, even though they came later. So we hear the word sutta and sutra, and they're both sacred, let's say, for simplicity's sake, sacred texts in Buddhism. Collections. Sutra, I think it's related to the word sort of means sewn together, something like that. Anyway, so this evening, apparently there are 35 of these perfection of wisdom texts, and some of them they started getting longer and longer, more and more expressive. One of them is called the Perfection of Wisdom in 100,000 lines, and then often in Buddhism you find things as history goes on. They correct they correct the last kind of flowering of Buddhism. So one person emphasizes this, one culture emphasizes this, and then there'll be a sort of a counterbalance. So with the 100,000 lines, then came a Perfection of Wisdom text with one syllable. And it's like, this is like a bit hyperbolic. Let's get to the what is the point of this? And that one syllable is a or a. And it's useful to know what that means, because it's a helpful, I think it helps us to understand the whole gist of these texts. And means it's a negative in Sanskrit. So if you put it in the front of a word, it negates the word. So I've forgotten all words now, so I can't do it. What was a good version of? Anyway, so it'll come later. So what it's sort of saying is, what you thought it was is not that. So not wisdom. What you thought wisdom was, it's not that. Not mindfulness. Not that. So everything you thought it was, not that. So that gives us a flavour of what we might discover in the Heart Sutra. And in a minute, I'm going to ask someone from the team to hand us out a copy of this text. So we're looking today at the Heart Sutra, which is not as short as the one-syllable Perfection of Wisdom text, and it's not as long as the 100,000 line text either. It is quite succinct. It's quite condensed. I was thinking about it. It's a little bit, when you're packing your winter clothes and you put it in a vacuum pack bag. It's a bit like that. Like it's quite vacuum packed, but there's a lot in there. And if we to unzip it and pull it out, we'd see a lot. So we're going to get a taste of it, a sense of it. And some of you, if you've performed the sevenfold puja with us, which you may or may not have done, that's okay. You'll have heard the Heart Sutra being recited. So we usually recite it in a ritual. Yeah. So I'm going to read it out to you. The Bodhisattva of compassion, when he meditated deeply, saw the emptiness of all 5 skandhas and sundered the bonds that caused him suffering. Here then, form is no other than emptiness. Emptiness no other than form. Form is only emptiness. Emptiness only form. Feeling, thought and choice, consciousness itself, are the same as this. All things are by nature void. They are not born or destroyed, nor are they stained or pure, nor do they wax or wane. So in emptiness no form, no feeling, thought or choice, nor is there consciousness, no eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, no colour, sound, smell, taste, touch, or what the mind takes hold of, nor even act of sensing. No ignorance or end of it, nor all that comes of ignorance. No withering, no death, no end of them, nor is there pain or cause of pain, or cease in pain, or noble path to lead from pain, not even wisdom to attain. Attainment too is emptiness. So know that the Bodhisattva, holding to nothing whatever, but dwelling in prajna wisdom, is freed of delusive hindrance, rid of the fear bred by it, and reaches clearest nirvana. All Buddhas of past and present, Buddhas of future time, using this prajna wisdom, come to full and perfect vision. Hear then the great Dharani, the radiant peerless mantra, the Prajna Paramita, whose words allay all pain. Hear and believe its truth. Okay, so what I've left out from there is the mantra that gets described, and we'll hear that later. So I'll say a little bit about the Heart Sutra. So as I was saying in the first half, if we don't understand it, that's good. We needn't, we needn't at this stage. But if we can understand it, we'll be penetrating right to the heart of reality. We'll be dispensing with all of the unnecessary concepts and modes of thinking that the Buddha discovered hold us back. Yeah. So that's what we're going to sort of explore this evening. I'll give you a bit of background. So there are a few different translations of the text, and this is the shortest one that I've read actually, and some of them are quite elaborate. And what you have are two characters in the text. So there's a little drama, and the characters are, so we heard the Bodhisattva of compassion. Yeah, so the Bodhisattva of compassion, interestingly, appears right at the heart of this wisdom text. So we've got, in Buddhism, you've got wisdom and compassion as like described as two wings of a bird. Without either, the bird cannot fly. And in this book that I've been looking at to help guide through the Heart Sutra, our teacher, Sangharakshita, who wrote the book, says that through wisdom one knows reality, and through compassion one makes it known to others. Yeah. So through wisdom one knows reality. Through compassion one makes reality known to others. So that's how those two things support one another. So we have the Bodhisattva of compassion, who's responding to his wisdom by trying to help others gain wisdom. So the Bodhisattva of compassion, it describes that he meditated deeply and saw the emptiness of all five skandhas and sundered the bonds that caused him suffering. So all that we need to know there is that he had sundered bonds that caused him suffering. So the Bodhisattva of compassion is Avalokiteshvara. And we've got an image, he comes in different forms. We've got this beautiful shrine here. And at the end of the evening, I'd welcome you to come and have a look at the shrine and this image. So what's going on is Avalokiteshvara has 1,000-ish hands. It's described as 1,000, and 11 heads. Now the reason he has those many hands is in each hand there's an implement, and the heads are looking in all directions. So he's able to respond to the world, the cries of the world. So this is the symbol of that figure, a compassionate figure who's very, very capable of responding in many, many different ways. And the other character who doesn't appear in this translation, but he appears in other translations, is called Shariputra. And he's had a funny evolution through Buddhist history. So he was a real person. He was one of the Buddha's chief disciples. So taught loads of people, brought people to enlightenment, was praised by the Buddha. So all round, really excellent person. And he was very wise and actually very knowledgeable. And that so the text that we're looking at is like several hundred years after the Buddha's time. So it's a different phase of Buddhism, and by then Shariputra has become this kind of represented as someone who's accumulated a lot of knowledge and loves classifying things, but has got a limited perception of wisdom, limited wisdom. Yeah, so he's okay, but he's not great. That's how we can think about Shariputra as he's become this caricature in the Heart Sutra. So the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara is a more let's say, like, he's an archetypal figure. He doesn't exist sort of in the same form that you and I do. He's a kind of a cosmic description of compassion and wisdom. And he's in conversation with Shariputra, who has come to sort of represent someone who let's say that his understanding of enlightenment, rather than sort of 360, is a bit narrow. So that's the little drama, and what's happening in it is that Avalokiteshvara is teaching Shariputra. So he's saying to Shariputra, what you might have noticed when I read it out is that he's doing a lot of he's doing a lot of negation. So there are sentences where so in emptiness, no form, no feeling, thought or choice, nor is there consciousness. And so he's doing a lot of, you thought it was this, but no. We can think of Shariputra as being small and literal, taking things very, very literally, and Avalokiteshvara as having a compassionate vastness to his mind. So therefore, his wisdom, and our teacher Sangharakshita talks about this actually, that's maybe Shariputra is wise, but Avalokiteshvara has perfect wisdom, so complete. Something wise gives birth to perfect wisdom in this description. So that's one thing to notice. The other thing to notice is the way the text is created. So the form of it speaks in images. So I've just described the drama, the images of Avalokiteshvara conversing with Shariputra. And so that's the form, but the content is absolutely filled with concepts. It's tightly crammed with concepts, and this is what's been vacuum packed, is that all of these Buddhist concepts are squished into this text, and then what happens is that Avalokiteshvara keeps saying, "Oh, you thought you understood, but you didn't. It's not that. It's not that. It's not that." And we won't be able to pull apart all of these concepts. I mean, my mind would boggle, but we'll make a start with it. Yeah. So, just to say that this, the last thing this text is meant to be, also, this is kind of like the opposite to Amala Yodin's announcement in the tea break, which I think he was trying to be relatable. The Heart Sutra is not relatable, so it doesn't talk to the parts of it doesn't talk to our daily life. It doesn't talk to, our habitual ways of thinking. What it's doing is it's trying to disturb us and shake us completely out of that, So that's why it doesn't make sense, because it's saying that the sense that we make of the world is reductive. It covers up what's really going on, and we're going to try and pull that apart. So it's quite hard to talk about the Heart Sutra with like anecdotes in my own life, because the aim of it is to be so disruptive that everything that we thought we knew is turned upside down, or sort of smashed into bits, which sounds quite, in a way, it sounds quite violent, but we have to remember that beneath this is the Bodhisattva of compassion supporting this whole text. So everything that we thought, and this feels quite challenging to me, is wrong. And it's not that we sort of oh, I thought it was that, but you say it's that, so now okay, I understood it. It's like the mode of our thinking describes the nature of the world in the wrong way, and that's what it is. I was just thinking that there's another text called the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which what it says, I think this might illustrate like how turned upside down things could be. In the Tibetan Book of the Dead, it describes that when one encounters enlightenment, that the different elements, say the earth element, or the water element, or the air element, are pure. When they are perceived through the purified mind of an enlightened being, they're completely turned into light. So that's the difference between what the modes of thinking that we're normally in. So use that as a metaphor to what the Heart Sutra is trying to show us. So let's say the earth element. The earth element is what we touch. It's solidity. It's what we're resting upon and what we rest with. For discussion's sake. So it's saying that everything that we thought was solid, when perceived through a completely enlightened mind, the earth element becomes golden yellow light. So that's a meta. That's just, we don't need to. I mean, it's either true or it's not. I don't know, but it's a metaphor for how different a description of reality is for a Buddha. Yeah. And that's what the Heart Sutra is saying to us. Anything less than that isn't worth it. It's really only this penetrating understanding that's going to help us. So let's go into it a little bit more. Or maybe there's an emotional way of describing that actually that might also be helpful. So it's like day to day I make efforts to try and be kinder, to respond well to people, all of that's good. I should keep up that work, but what happens if we see in the way that's being described by this sutra is that the whole mode of our perception in relation to me and the other, so me trying to be kinder to you, that whole description of those two polarities is completely flipped. So in that case, there can only be compassion. Yeah. So that's the kind of disruption that the Heart Sutra is trying to imbibe within us. Yeah. So what it's asking of us is to let go of our normal way of being. Can we do that? Can we let go and experience the unknown rather than holding to the known or what we think we know? Can we? The invitation or the exhortation is: can we experience something unknown? Can we explore consciousness in such a way that we don't need to cling to our reductive way of seeing things? And through that, if we can glimpse something deeper, and we get a taste for that, then we'll want to do it. We want to do it more. Yeah. So, in the first, after we hear about the Bodhisattva of compassion, what he teaches is, this is the first verse. It's very etched in my mind. He says, "Here then, form is no other than emptiness, emptiness no other than form. Form is only emptiness, emptiness only form." Okay, so form is no other than emptiness, emptiness no other than form. Form is only emptiness, emptiness only form. So the topic of that verse is emptiness. What do you think? Well, what does emptiness mean? You don't need to be clever or sort of philosophical, just saying, what does emptiness mean? Yeah.
Nothingness, no object.
Yeah, nothingness, no object. Yeah. And what do you think? What do you think the sentence "form is no other than emptiness" means? Anyone enlightened? Help me out. Yeah.
So emptiness being space, being nothingness,
Mm-hmm.
form being somethingness, I
Mhm.
guess. And they both coexist. You can't have one without the other.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's part of the same. It's part of the whole. You know, you wouldn't know if you had form without emptiness because you wouldn't be able to. Wouldn't exist. It needs somewhere to go.
Okay, yeah, I see what you mean. It's a bit a sort of like an opposite, like without darkness there's no light, sort of something like.
Yeah, it's like you know the stars in the sky. You'd have the stars, and then the stars are in the sky, but the sky itself is empty.
Yeah,
But the
yeah.
stars are the form.
Yeah. Okay. Form. Yeah. Well, I think it's saying something about how those two experiences relate, and what it's saying is not that form doesn't exist. So you could read that sentence. Let's just stick with "form is no other than emptiness." So you could read that sentence as form. Okay, maybe I should talk about form actually first. So form in Buddhism is quite specific. It's let's say that like the external world. It's not your inner experience. It's like me. Here I am, and everything external to me is form. This, you guys, you all take form in my experience, not in my imagination. You do too, but it's the way I interpret the sense data that's coming at me. Yeah. So that's form. And you could, if we had a nihilistic bent, which many of us do, take that sentence, "form is no other than emptiness," just saying everything is sort of empty and, like a bit like dust crumbling for our fingers, that sort of empty and therefore meaningless. But it's not saying that. It's not saying that there is nothing. So I think that's sometimes an interpretation that people have of Buddhism, that are saying like, oh, Buddhism says that life is just like a dream and then it goes. It's much more than that. What it's saying is that form doesn't have anything essential about it. It doesn't have anything that exists independently of anything else. So I am made up of all sorts of things that didn't originate with me and will not stay with me. Does that make sense? So even materially, socially, instinctively, all of that, all of my makeup is even down to atoms cannot be separate, and therefore is supported by the rest of conditionality, something like that. And this is counter to how we see things. We act as though we're independent entities that need things and go about the world the world is our stage. We exit, we enter, we might change a little bit on the surface, but actually essentially we are ourselves. Yeah. I think my brain needs a little rest after that. So what we have to also remember is, well, I think what's happening is Avalokiteshvara is saying to Shariputra, you think you know what's going on, but you don't. And by saying that to Shariputra, he's also saying it to us. We, in the first half of the class, we talked about what it's like to be receptive and what it's like to not be receptive. And not being receptive is already thinking you know everything. It's like we think once you've sort of worked something out, I don't know, I'm a bit like this. I've worked something out. It took me a while to get to. And then if anything challenges it, I don't want to know. I've worked it out. Yeah. So, but we're sort of like that on a much, much deeper level rather than my sort of general resistance to new ideas. It's our mode of conceiving things is that that we separate things out and don't see the connectedness of it, and that what then the response to that is things are either attractive to us and we want them to strengthen our sense of self, or we want to push them away. They're a threat to our sense of ourselves. Yeah. So what's being described here is this great description, this word which gets translated as emptiness and also unhelpfully voidness, which is shunyata. So in the text, when in Sanskrit, it would be saying all of these things are shunya. Form is shunyata. Emptiness is, shunyata is also no other than form. Yeah. So that's the second sentence. Emptiness is no other than form. So form is no other than emptiness. Things do not contain something essential in and of themselves which is outside of conditions. And emptiness is not something, is not a thing either. So that's the tendency to literalize and turn things, let's say, activity into nouns. Emptiness is not a thing either. So don't literalize the idea of emptiness. Don't literalize anything. And it's also not saying that, like I said, it's not saying there is nothing. So it's saying things do appear. Our experience is, there is experience. Things do appear and they disappear. And they affect us. So that's the main thing to notice, is that our whole world does affect us. So we're not negating any of that. We're just saying we don't know what's going on. We've got our limited sense apparatus, the five senses and the mind, and that's it. What we've done is create a closed system, but actually there's way more that's going on in the world. So when he's talking about form, he then goes on to talk about the other aspects of the human experience: feeling, thought, and choice, and consciousness. All of this can be examined differently, not as something concepts to hold on to. Yeah. So in this way, the Heart Sutra is challenging us to let's say, maybe I'll just talk about my own personal responses. Like that, there's a teaching there which I wish I could understand, but also the level that I can understand it is just to keep knowing that I don't understand. So that's the best I can do with it at the moment. The Heart Sutra is to keep knowing that I don't understand, rather than making claims to you all that I have used this text to reach the gates of wisdom and now have come out the other side. But what it is something very, very unequivocal. And there are these stages in it. So he's saying the five skandhas, which are aspects of describing the body, they're empty. He's saying form is empty, and he's also saying, well, by saying that, sorry, I am getting tied up, but I'm getting there. Reality has nothing to do with our mental constructions. I think that's the best way of saying it. The reality, what's actually going on, has nothing to do with our mental constructions. And Bhante says, our teacher says, these ideas are ours, and they're nothing to do with reality. Reality is immune to our ideas. We can go around labelling anything that we like. We can make new systems to our heart's content, but it won't content our heart because it's not. It's got nothing to do with what's actually going on. And then what happens is a bit confounding. In later verses, it says no ignorance or end of it, and for quite a few lines, what Avalokiteshvara is doing is pulling the threads of the Buddhist tradition. So if you know any Buddhism, you'll find it there. So there's the Four Noble Truths and various other teachings, which I don't have time to say. But he's saying there's not that either. You thought it was that, but it's not even that. So the next teaching is that religion as an end in itself is also a whole set of concepts that we've just slapped on reality. We can only use Buddhism as a raft to the other shore, not as an edifice by which to construct a new kind of Buddhist identity. At some point we have to even let go of what we thought was most secure, and even that. And then near the end, he's saying, all Buddhas of past and present, Buddhas of future time, using this prajna wisdom, come to full and perfect vision. And he's saying that it's not only that there is no other way of understanding reality. We have to understand reality. There's no other way to experience enlightenment. It's the only way that has happened, and it's the only way that will happen. And these, our teacher describes as these great thunderclaps of teaching as he goes through the text. Avalokiteshvara, poor Shariputra is sitting there, and Avalokiteshvara is saying, to start with, you thought you were this, and you're not that, nor are you that, nor are you that, and nor is your learning of any use whatsoever, and don't think you can wriggle away from this, because this is the only way that you're going to understand. So this kind of relentless, almost commanding set of teachings that many of us in our Buddhist movement have learnt by heart. So it's there when there's an opening, I guess, to it in our experience, like the Heart Sutra, so called because it's essentialized, is apparent in our experience.